I ate alone on my birthday, table for 6. My husband, my best friend, even my own sister ignored the invites. They thought I didn't know about the affair. As I sipped champagne, the waiter handed me a note. Check your phones now. The champagne glass trembled in my hand as I stared at the photos on my phone. My husband Patrick kissing my sister Victoria, wearing my missing diamond ring like a trophy. Around me, the restaurant buzzed with birthday celebrations and anniversary toasts. But all I could hear was the deafening silence of 5 empty chairs at my table. 3 hours earlier I'd walked into Chez Laurent with such hope. The hostess, Marie, had greeted me with her usual warm smile. Table for 6, Mrs. Davidson? Special occasion? She'd asked, adjusting the fresh white lilies in the center of our reserved table. I'd practically glowed telling her it was my 47th birthday, that my family would be joining me for our traditional celebration. Patrick's bringing the cake, I'd told her, unable to hide my excitement. The red velvet one from Sweetheart Bakery, the same place we got our wedding cake 15 years ago. I'd mentioned that cake to him 3 times this week, dropping hints like breadcrumbs. Each time he'd nodded absently while scrolling through his phone, but I'd assumed he was listening. I always assumed he was listening. The first 20 minutes passed in nervous energy. I'd arranged the chairs just so, making sure Victoria's was positioned where she could see the entire restaurant. She loved people watching. Elizabeth's chair faced the window because she enjoyed the street view. Even Ethan and Haley's spots were chosen carefully, close enough to hear Patrick's stories but far enough from the kitchen to avoid the bustle that made Haley anxious. Marie had brought bread baskets and filled water glasses, her movements becoming more hesitant with each pass. By the 3rd refill she'd started avoiding my eyes. I understood. The pity was written across her face in careful, professional lines. My phone buzzed constantly those first 30 minutes. I kept expecting Patrick's name to flash across the screen with apologies about traffic or a work emergency that would make him 15 minutes late. Instead, it was spam calls and promotional text. The silence from my family felt deliberate, calculated. At 7:15 I ordered a glass of wine. By 7:30 I'd drained it and asked for the dinner menu. The waiter, Leo according to his name tag, had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been serving us for 3 years, knew our usual orders, remembered that Patrick always asked for extra butter with his bread. Should we wait a bit longer? Leo asked gently, pretending to adjust the unused silverware while stealing glances at the empty chairs. They're just running late, I replied, my voice steadier than my hands. But even as I said it, the words felt hollow. Victoria lived 12 minutes away and was notoriously early to everything. Elizabeth worked 6 blocks from the restaurant and had confirmed our plans twice this week. Patrick had left the house before me, claiming he needed to pick up supplies for tonight. The couple at the next table was celebrating their daughter's engagement. The young woman kept flashing her ring, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks as her mother held her hands. I touched my empty ring finger unconsciously, the same spot where my grandmother's diamond had lived for 15 years until it mysteriously vanished 3 weeks ago. Patrick had helped me search every drawer, every pocket, every corner of our house. His concern had seemed so genuine. By 8 o'clock the restaurant's dinner rush was in full swing. Families filled nearby tables with laughter and animated conversations. A group of teenagers shared an enormous chocolate cake, taking selfies and making memories I envied. An elderly couple held hands across their small table, finishing each other's sentences after what must have been decades together. I sat alone, checking my phone every few minutes. Each time the restaurant door opened, my heart jumped. Each time it wasn't someone I knew, a little more hope died. The empty chairs around me felt like accusations, evidence of relationships I'd apparently misunderstood, love I'd apparently imagined. Leo brought the appetizer I'd ordered, Victoria's favorite calamari, and gently suggested I might want to call my family. My fingers trembled as I dialed Patrick's number. It went straight to voicemail. Victoria's phone did the same. Elizabeth's rang once before cutting off as if she'd deliberately declined the call. That's when the real panic set in. This wasn't about traffic or work emergencies or forgotten plans. Something was very, very wrong. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts to find Ethan and Haley's number. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be my in-laws. They'd never missed a family gathering in the 15 years I'd known them. When Patrick had proposed, Ethan had cried. When we'd struggled with infertility, Haley had held me through every disappointment. The phone rang 3 times before Haley answered. "Natalie, sweetie, how are you feeling?" I'm at the restaurant," I said confused. "For my birthday dinner. Where are you and Ethan?" Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Haley's voice returned, smaller and uncertain. "We didn't know there was a dinner, honey. Patrick said you'd canceled because you weren't feeling well. He said you needed space from everyone right now." The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. Conversations at nearby tables became background noise like television static. The wine in my glass suddenly tasted bitter, and the smell of garlic from the kitchen made my stomach clench. "He said I canceled?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Yesterday morning," Haley continued, her tone growing more concerned with each word. "He called us both. Said you were having a rough patch and didn't want company. Ethan wanted to check on you anyway, but Patrick insisted you needed time alone." Patrick had lied to them. Patrick, who'd never missed a chance to have his parents over for dinner, who called them twice a week religiously, who'd built his entire identity around being the perfect son. He deliberately excluded them from my birthday. The question that had been lurking in the shadows of my mind for months stepped into the light. What else had he lied about? Leo appeared beside my table as if summoned by my distress. Without speaking, he placed a fresh glass of champagne next to my untouched dinner and a small, folded piece of paper beside it. His eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "It's time, Mrs. Davidson," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made me understand this wasn't about dinner service or restaurant protocol. My fingers fumbled with the paper, unfolding it slowly as if it might contain an explosive. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "Check your phones now." I looked up at Leo, but he'd already stepped away, giving me privacy for whatever was about to unfold. Around me, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm. Clinking glasses, murmured conversations, the soft jazz playing overhead. But I felt isolated in this moment, suspended between my old life and whatever truth was waiting on my phone. With trembling hands, I unlocked the screen. The photo gallery was open, displaying images I'd never seen before. My heart stopped, then began beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Patrick and Victoria kissing in what looked like this very restaurant. Victoria's hand extended toward the camera, my grandmother's ring sparkling on her finger like a beacon of betrayal. The timestamp showed 2 days ago. Tuesday evening, the same night Victoria had called to confirm our birthday plans with that unusually bright voice. There were more photos. Patrick and Victoria entering a hotel. Patrick and Victoria at a jewelry store. The same store where we'd had my ring resized years ago. A receipt for a romantic dinner for 2, charged to the credit card I rarely checked. But it was the final image that shattered whatever remained of my composure. A screenshot of text messages between Patrick and Victoria, planning their evening together while I sat at home, worried about my lost ring and excited about my birthday celebration. "She's so gullible," Victoria had written. "Still thinks she lost her ring. This is almost too easy." Patrick's response made my blood freeze. "Let her have her little birthday dinner. She'll sit there alone and finally understand what she means to everyone." They'd planned this. Not just the affair but the cruelty of this moment. They'd wanted me to sit here, surrounded by empty chairs, realizing that the people I loved most had chosen to hurt me in the most devastating way possible. But as I sat there, staring at the evidence of their betrayal, something unexpected happened. The tears I'd been fighting back dried up. The shaking in my hands stopped. The woman who'd spent months making excuses for suspicious behavior, who'd blamed herself for feeling paranoid, who'd convinced herself that love meant trusting even when trust felt foolish, that woman was gone. In her place sat someone I hadn't been in years. A woman who knew exactly what she was worth and what she deserved. They thought I was weak, predictable, the type to cry and forgive and pretend none of this had happened. They'd forgotten who I was before I became their wife, their sister, their convenient target. They were about to remember. I looked up from my phone, searching for Leo among the bustling restaurant staff. He was polishing wine glasses behind the bar, his movements methodical and calm, as if he hadn't just delivered evidence that would destroy my marriage. When our eyes met across the dining room, he gave the slightest nod. Not sympathy, not pity, just acknowledgement of a job completed. The story of how Leo became my unlikely ally began 8 days ago, though the seeds were planted months earlier. I'd started noticing things, Small inconsistencies that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Patrick's phone face down during dinner. Victoria declining my calls, then texting hours later with elaborate excuses. The way conversations stopped when I walked into rooms, replaced by overly bright smiles and sudden topic changes. Last Tuesday afternoon I'd been running errands downtown when I decided to stop by Chez Laurent. Not for lunch but because I needed to see Leo. He'd become more than just our waiter over the years. He was a fixture in our family celebrations. Someone who remembered anniversaries and asked about promotions and noticed when someone was missing from our usual group. I'd found him setting up tables for the evening service, his precise movements creating perfect place settings with military efficiency. The restaurant was nearly empty in that quiet space between lunch and dinner, sunlight streaming through tall windows and catching dust motes in golden beams. "Mrs. Davidson," he'd said, looking up with genuine surprise. "No reservation today?" "Leo, I need to ask you something," I'd begun, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt ridiculous as I prepared to speak them, like something from a spy novel rather than my ordinary life. "Have you seen Patrick here recently?" "Without me." His hands had stilled on the silverware. In that pause I saw the answer before he spoke. "Mrs. Davidson, Please," I'd interrupted. "I know how this sounds. I know I probably seem paranoid or jealous or unstable. But I need to know." Leo had set down the forks he'd been arranging and looked at me directly. Really looked, in a way that made me understand he'd been watching, noticing, putting pieces together just as I had. "Last week," he'd said carefully. "Thursday evening. He was here with your sister." The confirmation hit me like cold water even though I'd been expecting it. Did they seem? "They weren't acting like siblings-in-law," Leo had said gently. "I've served enough couples to know the difference between family dinner and something else." I'd closed my eyes, feeling the restaurant spin slightly around me. When I opened them, Leo was still watching me with those kind, intelligent eyes that had served our family for years. "I need proof," I'd whispered. "I know that makes me sound calculating, but I need to be sure. I need evidence." Leo had glanced around the empty restaurant, then pulled out a chair at the table he'd been setting. "Sit down, Mrs. Davidson. Let me tell you what I've observed." Over the next 20 minutes, Leo had painted a picture that shattered every excuse I'd made for their behavior. He'd seen them here 3 times in the past month, always Tuesday evenings when I had book club. They'd requested the corner booth, the same one where Patrick had proposed to me years ago. Victoria had worn different jewelry each time, pieces I'd never seen before. "Last Tuesday she had on a diamond ring," Leo had said, his voice careful. "Beautiful piece. Looked vintage. My grandmother's ring. The one I'd reported missing to our insurance company. I can't just spy on customers," Leo had continued, "but if they happen to come in again and if I happen to be in the right place at the right time." He trailed off meaningfully. "Would you?" I'd asked. If it's not too much trouble, could you?" "Mrs. Davidson, you've been coming here for 3 years. You remember my daughter's graduation, you ask about my mother's health, you tip well even when service is slow. Your husband tips exactly 15% and snaps his fingers when he wants another drink. Your sister has never once said please or thank you." Leo had straightened the already perfect place setting. "If they're planning to hurt you, they picked the wrong restaurant to do it in." The next morning, Leo had texted me from an unknown number. "They made a reservation for tonight. Table 12. 7:30. I'd stared at that message for an hour, my coffee growing cold as I processed what it meant. They weren't just having an affair. They were flaunting it in the place where Patrick and I had celebrated every milestone of our marriage. By evening I'd convinced myself not to go. What would I do, hide behind a plant like some detective show? Confront them publicly? The scenarios all seemed either ridiculous or destructive. But Leo had texted again at 6:15, "They're here early. You should know, she's wearing your ring." I'd driven to the restaurant without a plan, parking across the street where I could see through the windows. There they were at table 12, Victoria's left hand catching the candlelight as she gestured, my grandmother's diamond sparkling like it was celebrating its liberation from my jewelry box. My phone had buzzed with another message from Leo. "Kitchen entrance. Staff parking lot. I can get you inside if you want to see for yourself." I'd found myself walking through the back door of Chez Laurent like a character in someone else's story. Leo had given me a server's apron and pointed me toward the service station that offered a clear view of table 12. "They can't see you from here," he'd whispered. "But you can hear everything." Victoria had been mid-sentence when I tuned in. "Thinks I'm at yoga class. She's so trusting it's almost sad." "She believes everything," Patrick had replied, cutting his steak with aggressive precision. "Yesterday she thanked me for helping her look for that ring. Actually thanked me." They'd laughed together, the sound sharp and cruel in the intimate restaurant atmosphere. Other diners had glanced their way, perhaps wondering what was so amusing. "Sometimes I think she knows," Victoria had said, twirling the ring around her finger. "Like she's testing us, waiting to see how far we'll go." "Natalie doesn't have the spine for confrontation," Patrick had responded. "She'll make excuses for us until we're ready to stop playing games." Leo had appeared beside me with a small device I hadn't noticed before, the restaurant security system tablet. "Audio and video," he'd whispered. "I have access for safety reasons." "This qualifies as safety, doesn't it?" I'd nodded, unable to speak as I watched my husband feed my sister bites of dessert with the same fork he'd used to feed me cake on our wedding day. The recordings had captured everything. Their plans to use my credit card for a weekend trip, their discussion of which friends they'd tell first when they came clean, their casual cruelty about my supposed naivety. Leo had transferred all of it to a secure folder on my phone, along with photos taken from multiple angles and timestamps that proved this wasn't their first romantic dinner. "The hotel reservation is under your name," Leo had said as we'd watched them prepare to leave. I heard them discussing it. "Same card you have on file here." The betrayal had layers I was still discovering. Not only were they having an affair, but they were financing it with my money and laughing about my stupidity while wearing my jewelry. As Patrick and Victoria had left the restaurant that night, Leo had handed me a small envelope. Inside was a receipt for their dinner, charged to the card I'd given them years ago for family emergencies, and a note in his careful handwriting: "You deserve better than people who celebrate hurting you." Now, sitting at my birthday table with the evidence burning in my phone, I understood why Leo had looked so determined when he'd placed that champagne glass beside my plate. He hadn't just gathered proof of their affair, he'd documented their plan to humiliate me tonight, their expectation that I'd sit here alone while they celebrated elsewhere. I caught Leo's attention and mouthed "thank you" across the dining room. He'd given me more than evidence. He'd given me the gift of knowing exactly who these people were when they thought no one was watching. That knowledge was worth more than any birthday present I'd ever received. My phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number. "Whatever you decide to do next, Mrs. Davidson, you're not alone in this." For the first time in months, I smiled. That smile lingered on my lips as I left the restaurant, Leo's final text still glowing on my screen. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe properly. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by something sharper, cleaner, absolute clarity. I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot, key in the ignition but engine silent. The digital clock on the dashboard read 9:47 p.m. My birthday was almost over, but the real celebration was just beginning. I scrolled through the evidence Leo had transferred to my phone, 23 photos for audio recordings, and a paper trail of financial betrayal that painted a picture so complete it could hang in a gallery titled, "How to Destroy a Marriage in 3 Easy Steps." The most damning recording was only 47 seconds long. Patrick's voice, casual and confident. "She'll never check the credit card statements. I handle all the finances. She doesn't even know how to log into our banking app." Victoria's laughter in response was like breaking glass. They were wrong about that too. I pulled up our joint banking account on my phone, the app Patrick thought I didn't know existed. 3 months of suspicious charges stared back at me. Romantic dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, hotel stays during my work conferences, even a jewelry store purchase dated the day after I'd reported my ring missing. They'd been so confident in my ignorance that they hadn't even tried to hide it. My fingers moved across the phone screen with surgical precision. First, a group text to all 3 of them: "Hope your night was worth it." I watched the message deliver, then almost immediately, 3 dots appeared under Patrick's name. Then Victoria's. Then Elizabeth's. All typing frantically, probably crafting elaborate lies or desperate apologies. I turned the phone off before any of their messages could arrive. The drive home took 12 minutes through quiet suburban streets lined with houses where other families were probably settling in for the evening. Children being tucked into bed, couples sharing nighttime conversations, grandparents calling to say goodnight. Normal families with normal problems and normal love. I'd forgotten what normal looked like. Our house sat dark except for the porch light Patrick had installed last year for my safety. Even his thoughtful gestures felt tainted now. Had he been genuinely concerned about my well-being, or was it guilt manifesting as overprotection? Inside, I bypassed my cell phone charging station and went straight to the landline in the kitchen. The old-fashioned phone Patrick always complained about but I'd insisted on keeping. What if there's an emergency and the cell towers are down? I'd argued. Tonight I was grateful for my paranoia. Ethan answered on the second ring. Natalie? Is everything all right? It's almost 10 o'clock. I need to talk to you and Haley. Are you both available? Of course, sweetheart. Let me get Haley. You sound upset. Haley's voice joined the line a moment later, breathless from hurrying to the phone. What's wrong, honey? Patrick said you weren't feeling well today, that you'd canceled your birthday dinner because you were having one of your episodes. The word, episodes, hit me like a physical blow. Why episodes? He's been worried about you, Haley continued, her maternal concern evident even through the phone line. Said you've been paranoid lately, imagining things, getting upset over nothing. He asked us to give you some space until you felt better. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Patrick hadn't just been cheating, he'd been systematically undermining my credibility, painting me as unstable so that when the truth finally came out, everyone would question my version of events rather than his. Haley, Ethan, I said, my voice steadier than it had been all day, would you like to see why Patrick really canceled you tonight? I spent the next few minutes walking them through the process of accessing the files Leo had sent me. The silence that followed was so complete I checked twice to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Ethan spoke first, his voice raw with a fury I'd never heard from my gentle father-in-law. He gave Victoria my grandmother's ring? The one I specifically chose for your engagement because it had been in our family for 3 generations. That ring was meant to be passed down to your children, Haley whispered, her voice thick with tears. It was supposed to stay in our family. It will, I said quietly. I'm getting it back. The next hour became a blur of revelations and reactions. I sent them carefully selected pieces of evidence, enough to prove the betrayal without overwhelming them with the cruelest details. The photos were clinical, the audio clips devastating, the financial records undeniable. 37 years I've been married to that boy's father, Haley said through tears that I could hear clearly through the phone. I taught him how to treat a woman by watching Ethan treat me. How did we raise someone capable of this? You didn't raise this, I assured her. Patrick made these choices as an adult. You gave him a foundation of love and respect. What he built on top of that was his decision. While we talked, I opened my laptop and logged into our family WhatsApp group. 32 members spanning 3 generations, from Patrick's 90-year-old grandmother to his youngest cousin's new baby. This group had shared wedding announcements, birth notifications and holiday photos for years. Tonight it would share something different. I selected the clearest photo from Leo's collection. Patrick and Victoria at their corner table, her left hand prominently displayed as he kissed her knuckles, my grandmother's ring catching the candlelight like a spotlight on their betrayal. The timestamp was clearly visible. Tuesday evening, 8:23 p.m. No caption. No explanation. Just truth, uploaded for everyone who'd ever trusted these people to see. My phone, still turned off and charging in the kitchen, began buzzing against the counter like an angry wasp. Even powered down, I could feel the digital chaos I'd unleashed. The group chat is exploding, Ethan said, his voice mixing satisfaction with sadness. Your cousin Maria just asked if that's really Victoria wearing your ring. What did you tell her? The truth. That we're as shocked as everyone else. Within minutes, my private messages began filling up on the laptop. Cousins who'd watched Victoria and me grow up together, family friends who'd attended both our weddings, distant relatives who'd only heard stories about the sisters-in-law who were closer than biological siblings. Elizabeth's message arrived at 11:34 p.m. Natalie, I need to explain. I had no idea about Patrick and Victoria. I swear on my mother's grave I didn't know about the affair. Patrick told me you were struggling with paranoia, that you'd been accusing him of cheating when he was completely innocent. He said you needed space from friends because you were convinced everyone was lying to you. I thought I was being supportive by staying away from your birthday dinner. Please call me. Please let me explain. I stared at her message for a long time, feeling something that wasn't quite forgiveness but wasn't hatred either. Elizabeth had been manipulated too, turned into an unwitting accomplice in my isolation. Patrick had played us all, using our love for each other as weapons against each other. But manipulation was still a choice. Elizabeth could have called me directly instead of taking Patrick's word. She could have trusted our 20-year friendship over his recent claims. She could have shown up anyway just to be sure. He didn't. The house felt different around me as I closed the laptop and finally turned my phone back on. 73 missed calls. 112 text messages. Voicemails that would probably take hours to get through. The digital avalanche I'd started was still gaining momentum, and I was the only one standing safely above it. For the first time in months I felt powerful. Not cruel, not vindictive, but powerful in the way that comes from absolute honesty in a world built on lies. They'd all underestimated me. Patrick, Victoria, Elizabeth, even myself. They'd forgotten that the quietest people often see the most, and the most trusting people fight the hardest when that trust is broken. Tomorrow would bring confrontations, decisions, and probably more tears. But tonight was mine. I woke at dawn to the sound of Patrick's key in the front door. 23 hours had passed since I'd uploaded that photo, 23 hours of digital warfare that had kept me surprisingly calm. I'd slept better than I had in months, the weight of secrets finally lifted from my shoulders. From my bedroom window, I watched him stumble out of his car, the same car he'd claimed was in the shop last Tuesday when Victoria had supposedly given him a ride to work. Another lie in a fortress built from them. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and even from the second floor, I could see the exhaustion etched into his shoulders. He'd spent the night somewhere, probably Victoria's apartment, trying to coordinate their damage control strategy. I almost felt sorry for them, scrambling to contain a disaster they'd created with their own arrogance. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, positioning myself with a clear view of the front door. The morning light streaming through our bay window felt different, cleaner somehow, as if the truth had scrubbed away years of accumulated grime. Patrick's whistling started before he even reached the kitchen, a tuneless melody that grated against my nerves. He walked in with exaggerated casualness, phone already in his hand, scrolling through what I assumed were desperate damage control messages. "Morning, Han," he said without looking up, his voice carrying that practiced lightness he used when he was lying. "Where were you last night?" I tried calling but it went straight to voicemail. The audacity was breathtaking. He was going to pretend none of it had happened, act like the previous evening's revelations were just a figment of everyone's imagination. I slid my phone across the kitchen island without a word, the photo gallery already open to Leo's carefully documented evidence. Then I stood and walked away, counting each step with deliberate precision. 1, 2, 3. My grandmother's china cabinet, inherited through 3 generations of women who'd never had to question their husband's fidelity. 7, 8, 9. The refrigerator covered with our vacation photos, memories I now understood were mostly fiction. 12, 13, 14. By step 12 I heard his sharp intake of breath, a sound like air being sucked from a punctured tire. By step 15 his coffee mug hit the kitchen floor with a ceramic crash that seemed to echo through the house. "You invaded my privacy." The words exploded from him as he stumbled after me, my phone clutched in his trembling hands like evidence at a crime scene. His face had gone pale except for 2 bright spots of red on his cheeks. I laughed. The sound surprised me, rich, genuine laughter that I hadn't heard from myself in months. "Patrick, you invaded my life. You stole my ring, my credit card, my trust, and my sister. Privacy was forfeited the moment you decided to destroy our marriage with someone who's supposed to love me." He tried to hand my phone back with shaking fingers, as if returning it would somehow undo what he'd seen. "Natalie, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you and Victoria having a romantic dinner with my stolen ring while planning to use my credit card for a weekend getaway." I kept my voice conversational, almost pleasant. "What exactly am I misunderstanding?" His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Patrick had always been quick with explanations, able to rationalize away suspicious behavior with elaborate stories that made me question my own perceptions. Now, faced with photographic evidence, his silver tongue had turned to lead. The locksmith would arrive in 90 minutes. I'd called them at sunrise, explaining I needed to change the locks due to a security concern. They hadn't asked questions. "Pack your things," I said, gesturing toward the stairs. "Take only what belongs to you. You don't live here anymore." The transformation was immediate and predictable. Shock became denial, denial became anger, anger became desperate bargaining. He cycled through his usual tactics like a player running the same playbook. Tears that had worked during our early arguments, promises he'd made and broken before, blame shifting that had once made me doubt my own reality. "This is all Victoria's fault," he said, grabbing my hands with the same fingers that had touched my sister's skin. "She seduced me, Natalie. She's been after me for months. I was weak, but I love you. I've always loved you." I pulled my hands free and stepped back, studying his face like I was seeing it for the first time. The same blue eyes that had promised me forever. The same mouth that had whispered sweet lies. The same expression he'd worn while helping me search for my missing ring. "You're right about one thing, you are weak," I said. "But Victoria didn't force you to lie to your parents about my birthday dinner. She didn't make you steal from our savings or use my credit card for your romantic getaways. She didn't make you call me unstable to justify your betrayal." He flinched at that last part. "How did you know about the episodes you've been telling everyone about? The way you've been systematically destroying my credibility so people would question my sanity instead of your fidelity?" I smiled again, and this time it wasn't pleasant. "You underestimated me, Patrick. You forgot that trusting doesn't mean stupid." A car door slammed outside, followed by hurried footsteps on our front porch. Victoria right on schedule. She'd probably been calling Patrick all morning, planning their strategy, deciding who would say what and how they'd minimize the damage. She walked in without knocking, a privilege she'd earned as my sister-in-law and was about to lose as my betrayer. Her mascara was streaked, her hair uncombed, and my grandmother's ring still sparkled on her finger like a beacon of her selfishness. "Natalie, please," she began, her voice carrying the same pleading tone she'd used as a child when caught stealing cookies. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened." I looked at her, really looked, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time in years. This woman had held me while I cried about my marriage troubles, had listened to me worry about Patrick's distant behavior, had comforted me when I thought I was losing my mind over small betrayals I couldn't prove. "You wore the ring I searched the whole house for," I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. "You let me sob on your shoulder thinking I'd lost it. You comforted me while wearing the evidence of your betrayal." "It was just," she started. "Just what?" I interrupted. "Fun? Convenient? Did you laugh about it with him? About how stupid I was? About how easy it was to fool me?" Her silence was answer enough. Another car pulled into the driveway, Ethan's distinctive engine rumble. They'd driven through the night just as I'd expected. The confrontation was about to become a family affair. Ethan walked through the door first, his usually gentle face hard with an anger I'd never seen before. Behind him, Haley looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Without a word, Ethan walked directly to Patrick and slapped him across the face. Not a theatrical movie slap, but the real thing, sharp, shocking, and absolutely final. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot. Patrick staggered backward, one hand pressed to his reddening cheek, his mouth opening in shock. In 15 years of marriage, I'd never seen anyone lay a hand on him. "That's for the ring," Ethan said quietly. "My grandmother's ring, which was supposed to stay in our family." Haley refused to even look at Victoria, keeping her eyes fixed on Patrick with the expression of someone staring at roadkill. "You disgust me," she said, her voice flat and final. 30 years I've known you, Victoria. 30 years of birthdays and holidays and family dinners. 30 years of thinking you were someone worth loving." Victoria started to speak, but Haley held up one hand, stopping her cold. "Don't. Just don't. There's nothing you can say that would make this anything other than what it is. A betrayal so complete it's changed how I see the last 3 decades of my life." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock and Patrick's ragged breathing. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, and somewhere down the street, someone started a lawnmower. Normal Saturday morning sounds from a world that hadn't been turned upside down by lies and betrayal. This wasn't just my war anymore. It had become theirs too, a family fractured by selfishness and lies that would take years to heal, if healing was even possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Please call me. I can explain everything." I deleted it without reading it twice. Some explanations came too late, and some betrayals ran too deep for words to bridge. Elizabeth had made her choice when she'd chosen Patrick's version of reality over 20 years of friendship. The easiest cut, I was learning, was sometimes the cleanest one. The locksmith arrived 15 minutes early, a grizzled man named Frank who took one look at the tense faces in my kitchen and asked no questions beyond standard deadbolt or something more secure. I chose more secure. Some doors once closed should stay that way. While Frank worked, Patrick gathered his belongings with the mechanical movements of someone in shock. Victoria had disappeared without a goodbye, probably realizing that her presence only made things worse. Ethan and Haley sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching their son pack his life into garbage bags like the trash he'd made of our marriage. "The house is in both our names," Patrick said, his voice hollow as he stuffed shirts into a duffel bag. "I have rights." "You forfeited your rights when you started stealing from me," I replied, sorting through the mail that had accumulated over the past week. Bills, catalogs, and a letter from our insurance company about my ring claim. "My lawyer will explain the rest." That lawyer was Mia Chin, recommended by Haley's book club after her friend Janet had used her during her own divorce. "She's ruthless," Janet had warned, "but fair. If you're in the right, she'll make sure you stay there." 5 days after the confrontation, I sat across from Mia in her downtown office, watching her review the evidence Leo had gathered. She was exactly as Janet had described, sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, with the kind of confidence that came from winning battles others were afraid to fight. "This is remarkably thorough," Mia said, scrolling through the photos and financial records. "Your waiter friend should consider a career in private investigation." "He was just looking out for me," I said. "Good friends are worth their weight in gold," she replied, making notes on a legal pad. "Especially friends who document everything. The financial theft alone gives us significant leverage." The following Saturday, exactly 1 week after my disastrous birthday dinner, I made the same reservation at Chez Laurent. Table for 6, 7 o'clock. This time I'd filled every seat. Marie, the hostess, smiled when she saw me walk in with Ethan and Haley. "Mrs. Davidson, how lovely to see you again. And you've brought friends." "Family," I corrected, feeling the word settle differently on my tongue. "The real kind." Leo appeared almost immediately, his professional demeanor softening when he saw our group. "Mrs. Davidson, what a pleasure. Your usual table." "Actually, I'd like to request a different one," I said. "Something with a view." He understood immediately, leading us to a table by the window where I could see the street, the people walking by, the world continuing to turn despite the earthquake that had shaken my life apart. The fourth member of our party was Mia Chin, who'd agreed to join us after finalizing the divorce papers. She was smaller than I'd expected, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I hope you don't mind mixing business with pleasure," I said as she took her seat. "I find the best business often happens over good food," she replied, accepting the menu Leo offered. "Besides, celebrating victories is part of the process." The fifth chair belonged to someone unexpected, Dr. Sarah Martinez, the therapist Haley had recommended. I'd been seeing her twice a week, untangling 15 years of emotional manipulation and rediscovering who I was underneath Patrick's careful reconstruction of my identity. "It's important to have witnesses to your growth," Dr. Martinez had said when I'd invited her. "And I'd like to meet this Leo who helped you find your strength." Leo himself was our sixth guest, joining us during his break with the manager's blessing. He traded his server's apron for a simple button-down shirt, looking younger without the professional uniform. "I've never been a dinner guest at my own restaurant before," he admitted, settling into the chair beside Dr. Martinez. "You've never helped solve a marriage before either," I replied. "Tonight's about firsts." We toasted with real champagne this time, Dom Perignon, not the house brand I'd nursed alone a week earlier. Ethan raised his glass first. "To truth," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "To endings," Haley added, her own glass catching the candlelight. "To new beginnings," I finished, feeling the words resonate through my chest. Leo brought out a slice of birthday cake, Chocolate with fresh strawberries instead of the red velvet Patrick had never delivered. On the house, he said with a wink, setting it down with a single candle. Better late than never. As I blew out the candle, I made a wish I'd never thought to make before, for the strength to keep choosing myself every day for the rest of my life. The weeks that followed blurred together in a symphony of small victories and practical decisions. Patrick tried everything: guilt trips that fell on deaf ears, love letters that went straight to the trash, flowers delivered to my office that I donated to the local nursing home. He showed up at my favorite coffee shop, at the grocery store, at places he knew I'd be, always with the same desperate expression and rehearsed apologies. I made a mistake, he'd say, as if betrayal was something that happened accidentally, like spilling coffee or forgetting an anniversary. You made a choice, I'd reply, walking past him like he was a stranger asking for directions to somewhere I'd never been. I blocked his number, closed our joint accounts, and froze the credit cards. Each practical step felt like shedding old skin, revealing something stronger underneath. The woman who'd once apologized for existing was learning to take up space without asking permission. The confrontation with Victoria came 3 weeks later at the Whole Foods on 5th Street. I'd been shopping for dinner ingredients, finally learning to cook for one person instead of always preparing meals for two. She was in the produce section, looking thinner than I remembered, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked like fear. She saw me first, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. When our eyes met across the Apple display, I walked directly toward her, my hand extended. "Pie ring," I said simply. She looked around as if hoping someone would rescue her from the conversation. The produce section continued its Saturday afternoon bustle around us. Families picking vegetables, couples debating dinner plans, children begging for candy. Normal people living normal lives. "Natalie, The ring, Victoria." She slipped it off without another word, her face red with shame and anger. The diamond felt heavier than I remembered, weighed down by the lies it had participated in. I walked straight from the grocery store to Pawn King on Madison Avenue, where a thin man with kind eyes offered me more than I'd expected. "Gilt jewelry always sells for less than love jewelry," he said with a knowing smile, "but this piece has good bones. Someone will treasure it properly." I used the money for legal fees and a weekend getaway to Napa with Ethan and Haley, my real family, the ones who'd never lied to protect a lie. We stayed at a bed and breakfast run by a woman who'd been divorced twice and married 3 times. "The third time's the charm," she told me over breakfast, "but the first time being alone is magic." Victoria moved out of state within the month, according to the family gossip network that had become my unlikely intelligence service. Haley told me she didn't even attend her own goodbye dinner. The few friends she had left were too disgusted to show up. "Let her eat alone," Haley said with grim satisfaction. "Now she knows how it feels." But I felt no satisfaction in Victoria's isolation, no pleasure in her pain. I'd turned my own pain into something more valuable: peace, clarity, and the hard-won knowledge that I could survive anything as long as I didn't have to survive it while pretending it wasn't happening. I didn't scream or break dishes or slash tires. I didn't need dramatic gestures or public scenes. I just showed them exactly who they were, and in doing so discovered who I could be without them. That discovery was worth more than any marriage I'd lost. The discovery that would define the rest of my life was worth more than any marriage I'd lost. 3 months later, as I sat in my newly renovated home office, I could see that truth clearly. The room had been Patrick's den before. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture that smelled like his cologne, shelves lined with books he'd bought to impress visitors but never read. Now it was mine: bright white walls, a standing desk by the window, and plants that actually received sunlight. But the centerpiece wasn't my new computer or the certificates from my freelance writing courses. It was a simple black frame hanging above my desk, containing a small piece of paper with 4 words written in Leo's careful handwriting: "Check your phones now." That note had arrived at the exact moment I needed it most. Not just the information it contained, but the reminder that someone somewhere was paying attention to my pain and chose to act. It represented the first honest communication I'd received in months, maybe years. No sugarcoating, no gentle evasion, no well-meaning lies to protect my feelings. Just truth, delivered with surgical precision. I'd had it professionally framed 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, treating it with the reverence other people reserved for diplomas or family portraits. Below it, in my own careful script, I'd added a line that had become my daily mantra. Don't wait for them to remember you. Remind them who you are. Sometimes I caught myself staring at those words, remembering the woman who'd sat alone at table 6, still hoping her betrayers would walk through the restaurant door with cake and apologies. She felt like a character from someone else's story now, sympathetic but foreign, like reading about a stranger's misfortune in the newspaper. My birthday had been transformed from a day of expectation and inevitable disappointment into an anniversary of awakening. Last year I'd celebrated alone, not the bitter solitude I'd experienced at Chez Laurent, but the intentional, luxurious solitude of someone who'd finally learned the difference between being lonely and being alone. I'd taken myself to a spa in the mountains, spent the day hiking trails that challenged my body and cleared my mind, then returned to a hotel room where no one questioned my choices or made me doubt my perceptions. For dinner, I'd eaten room-service chocolate cake while watching the sunset from my balcony, feeling more complete than I had in any restaurant surrounded by people who were supposed to love me. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Dr. Martinez had warned me about that during our early sessions, when I'd wanted to skip ahead to the part of healing where everything made sense and nothing hurt anymore. Recovery isn't linear, she'd said during one particularly difficult session where I'd spent most of the hour crying. Some days you'll feel powerful and some days you'll feel like you're back at square one. That's normal. That's human. She'd been right about the setbacks, but she'd also been right about the breakthroughs. The first time I'd gone a full day without thinking about Patrick or Victoria or Elizabeth, I'd actually panicked, worried that forgetting them meant I was becoming callous or unfeeling. Dr. Martinez had laughed, not mockingly, but with the warmth of someone who'd guided countless people through the same fears. Healing isn't forgetting, she'd explained. It's remembering without bleeding. The journaling had started as homework from therapy but evolved into something more essential than daily vitamins. Every morning I filled pages with thoughts I'd kept locked away for years, observations about my marriage that I'd dismissed as paranoia, dreams I'd abandoned to support Patrick's ambitions, moments of clarity I'd talked myself out of because they weren't nice or supportive. One entry, written 6 months after my birthday disaster, had surprised me with its honesty. I think I knew about the affair long before I admitted it to myself. The signs were everywhere. Patrick's new cologne, Victoria's sudden interest in my schedule, the way they both became overly helpful when I mentioned feeling suspicious. I let them convince me I was imagining things because confronting the truth felt more dangerous than living with the lies. Reading those words back to myself had been like looking at an X-ray of a broken bone I'd been ignoring, painful but necessary for proper healing. The freelance writing had begun as financial necessity but become creative liberation. Without Patrick's opinions about what constituted real work, or his subtle discouragement of my ambitions, I'd discovered I had opinions worth sharing and stories worth telling. My first published article, about recognizing financial abuse in marriages, had been read by thousands of women who'd shared their own stories in the comments. "You saved my life," one woman had written. "I've been making excuses for my husband's behavior for 8 years, but your article helped me see the patterns. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week." Those messages became the fuel for more articles, more speaking engagements, more opportunities to transform my pain into purpose. The woman who'd once apologized for taking up space was learning to use her voice to create space for others. The house had been transformed too, room by room, like a slow-motion renovation of my soul. Patrick's golf trophies in the living room became bookshelves lined with novels I'd wanted to read but never found time for. His man cave became my office. The master bedroom was repainted from the beige he'd preferred to the soft blue that made me feel calm. The kitchen, where I'd prepared thousands of meals for a man who'd criticized my cooking while stealing my money, became my favorite room. I'd learned to cook for one person, not because I was alone but because I was whole. Friends visited now, real friends who asked about my dreams instead of updating me on their husbands' achievements. Colleagues stopped by to collaborate on projects that excited me. Ethan and Haley came for dinner every Sunday, filling the house with laughter that felt genuine instead of performed. The woman who'd once sobbed into her salad at table 6 truly didn't live here anymore. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, unafraid of empty chairs or silent phones. Someone who understood that the opposite of loneliness wasn't being surrounded by people. It was being surrounded by people who saw her clearly and chose to stay. Patrick still texted occasionally from blocked numbers, usually late at night when alcohol made him sentimental about what he'd lost. The messages always followed the same pattern: regret, promises, blame for everyone except himself. I deleted them unread, not out of anger but out of indifference. His words had lost their power to hurt me the moment I stopped believing they contained any truth worth considering. Victoria had sent a Christmas card last year with no return address, as if anonymity could somehow resurrect a relationship she'd murdered with her own hands. I'd used it to start the first fire in my new fireplace, watching her forced cheer curl into ash while I sipped hot chocolate and planned my New Year's resolutions. Elizabeth appeared in my social media suggestions sometimes, Facebook's algorithm still trying to reconnect relationships that were better left disconnected. I scrolled past without curiosity or anger, the way I'd scroll past an advertisement for something I'd already decided I didn't need. They'd lost the best thing they'd ever had. Someone who'd loved them unconditionally, who'd forgiven their smaller betrayals and celebrated their successes as if they were her own. Someone who'd made excuses for their behavior and carried their secrets and prioritized their comfort over her own peace of mind. All I'd lost was the weight of their lies, the exhaustion of pretending their love was real, and the constant anxiety of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Not a bad trade at all. If this story of betrayal and empowerment had you captivated from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Leo handed Natalie that note saying, "Check your phones now." The moment everything changed. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more incredible stories of strength and justice like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.